Started Palantir 18 years ago with my roommate from college. And then there were a few other key people as co-founders, obviously Peter Thiel. We brought in Alex Karp. Alex was pretending to be the CEO at first for us because we needed an adult in the room. And then it turned out he was actually a good CEO. He's a philosopher before that. So pretty cool background. He had a lot of wisdom about people and institutions. The rest of us were computer scientists. And so that mixed in really well. And what does Palantir do? Palantir, the high level goal of Palantir was to take the top technology cultures of Silicon Valley and apply it to the most important problems in Washington, D.C. and the East Coast institutions. And so the idea was that there's like this $100 billion plus being spent on various types of data and services around important problems with analysts in the intelligence and defense world, that the problems there, as well as for big companies. And we wanted to be able to say, okay, some of these things, rather than being services, could actually be done with products out of the box. And so we looked at like 50 government contracting mess ups where they spent between 50 million and a few $1 billion on these big projects. And these things always went over budget. They always went over time. They never quite solved problems as well as they could have. And we said, how can we create a single platform that does most of all these 50 out of the box and solve these really important problems? And how can we make sure we're both protecting civil liberties as well as like bringing all the data together in a distributed world and making sure they get the bad guys. Most of Silicon Valley, ironically, does not engage with defense. Of course, I'm sure, obviously Silicon Valley started off by engaging with defense. That's where Hewlett Packard and everyone came from. And we lost that for a while. So because of this, there became this huge gap. And this is why we started Palantir. It's also why we started a couple other companies more recently. There's a huge gap between what's possible in the defense world and what you're seeing in the defense world. You're not getting the top technologists in the defense world attacking these problems. And this is what you do as a venture capitalist. This is what you do as an entrepreneur. You look for gaps in the world. You look for things that are like really broken compared to what they could be. And sadly, our defense has gotten really broken in a lot of areas because there's no one else is there. That's why Palantir was able to be such a big company. Like no one wants to work with Palantir when you show up, when you're like a bunch of 22, 23-year-old kids from Silicon Valley. You didn't serve in the military. You're not from their culture. You haven't hired like 22 generals to your company. Like they'd much rather work with the guys they know. So the only way you're going to win is you have to be like 10 times better. It's the only way you're going to be able to do it. But you can be 10 times better because Silicon Valley has gotten to be so far ahead of the East Coast. And so that's why it's a great business opportunity. It's also critical for our country to get talent working on these problems, especially in a world where China is obviously going to be saber rattling. I think the best hope for peace in the world is for China to realize that we're still innovating and that they're not getting ahead of us in defense. If they think they're ahead of us in defense and can make a fool of us, they're going to be very tempted to do so.